Talk a lot about the business side of writing, the marketing, the funnels, the revenue. But what happens when the product you're actually selling is your own grief? It's a total tightrope walk. You want to get the word out, but you also don't want to feel like you're commodifying your own trauma just to hit a sales goal. Today, I'm sitting down with author and co founder of Blue Hat Publishing, Jodi Cowles. She's navigated this firsthand, and she's here to walk us through how to treat your writing like a serious business, keep your brand strong, and most importantly, how to protect your own mental health while you're doing it. Jodi, it's so nice to have you here. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Laura. Thanks for inviting me on.
Let me start with traditional book marketing is often noisy and persistent, and it's a transactional thing. When an author's launching a book about deep grief of trauma, that doesn't really work. So, how do you advise authors to market these deeply sensitive books aggressively enough to build a business while still not compromising the reverence and dignity the subject matter demands?
You know, I can say that this is my first memoir. I've written 5 or 6 fiction books that had elements that were true to life, but this has been a completely different experience for me. So you're absolutely right. In the way that the marketing is different in the emotions that it triggers, and like you said, not wanting to commoditize your grief and your pain. It starts in the writing process that, we try to write our grief. I think there's a spectrum from what you're just writing down in your journal to what you might put into a book that you hold in your hand and try to sell to people. And we always say the first draft, you write everything, and the first draft is for you. And then editing from that point on is to be thinking about your reader and what can they glean from your life experience. What would you love to pass on to them? Just like you're passing on the 3 lessons you learned to your best friend across the table or something. And I think marketing is in that same vein. You want to focus on pulling out the 2 or 3 themes that you're most comfortable talking about and the facets of your book. You don't have to lead with the most painful thing or the biggest trauma. You lead with the couple of different angles that meet your reader where they are and offer them hope in a certain pain point or something. So in that way, I think it is similar to any other type of marketing. You need to narrow down the topics that you're talking about and try to meet your reader where they are.
So, specifically about marketing, how do you find your audience? Do you do that going all along through writing the book or even before, like through social media? How did you handle that, or how do you handle that for other authors?
Boy, I'll be completely honest with you. I'm still in the middle of that personally. I have been writing for 20 years. I have a number of books out, but I've never done it full time. It's always been writing is a personal passion, and marketing is not my strong suit. I am still trying to find my audience. I think that one thing that I have heard again and again is that we do need to niche down. For instance, my memoir is about my life and some grief and some trauma and some joy, but it's also about adoption. And so I can niche down into adoption forums and, Reddit groups and social media and tagging towards adoption and parenting. It's also about growing up in a faith tradition and having a crisis about it and going through the process of deciding what I'm going to believe based on, in comparison to what my parents raised me to believe. The faith crisis is a niche that you can look for audiences that are interested in that topic. I think we talk a lot about social media, and I'm sure you do too, because it's certainly a strong tool. But we at Blue Hat, we recommend to our authors that they try to create a relationship with their audience and grow their audience on their own rather than through social media, a platform that you could be taken off of from one day to the next, and then you have
Absolutely.
no business.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think personally and at Blue Hat, we are always recommending you start as soon as possible, even if you're still writing your first book, and you create an author newsletter and you start providing value, and you grow your audience by providing value in a particular niche, a particular topic.
So did you find that you had to almost rebuild an audience having your fiction and then this book? Do you market them completely separately?
I am the worst example that you could have on here for marketing. I have very sporadically marketed over 20 years in various ways. Starting with my first book, I was downsized out of my corporate job, so I bought a beater RV that I named Bertha, and I went around the country for 8 months trying to sell my book. So I've done a lot of crazy things for marketing. But the marketing of a memoir versus the marketing of fiction, I really don't think I'm approaching it differently in terms of genre. I'm just trying to approach it more. I'm trying to give more room to marketing. I'm trying different things. I'm trying to get on podcasts. Thank you very much for having me. I'm trying to get in front of audiences that I haven't been in front of before. I will say the one thing that's different about memoir, and it may be because of the topic and because we have a large network of dear, dear family and friends who were with us on the journey, I'm getting probably 10 times the feedback, people reading this book, than I've ever gotten for my fiction. And I always got positive reactions and reviews to my fiction, but the quantity of reviews that I'm getting on this book, it just blows them out of the water. And so I'm,
Right.
as a publisher, as a writer, as a marketer, authorpreneur, all of those things, I'm always running experiments in my head. And I think this experiment is proving very interesting in terms of how people connect with true story.
I think it's because you're speaking directly to their heart instead of their imagination. You said that you were probably the worst guest to have on marketing. I have to disagree with you. We all struggle with marketing. I've been doing marketing and sales all through my career, but it's still a struggle. It constantly changes. The trends change. It's noisy. It's hard. It is hard for anyone to market. And that's why you see so many books, podcasts, YouTube videos, how to market, why to market. It's not an easy puzzle to put together.
It's not. And there sure are a lot of like quick fix offers, I mean, I'm sure you do too. I get ads all the time to my social media offering me things that sound great. And I know that they're scams, or I know that they don't really move the needle. So I think that there's a whole industry set up around not exactly desperation, but certainly what people are hoping for when they write a deeply personal book and put it out into the world.
Right. I get that. So when someone who writes about trauma or grief, that book often triggers flood of readers that are looking to share their stories and the pain with the author. Like you were just saying, you probably see that in your reviews, your feedback. How can the author avoid burnout and protect their own mental health while supporting the book launch? Especially if you're an empathetic person, it would be difficult.
It is difficult. You're right. And that's a great aspect to bring out. I'm just going to give you my personal opinion for what it's worth. I think it goes back to the writing process, how healthy it is to write about our lives and especially our griefs and our victories. I wrote my memoir when I was 51. So that was a decent amount of life to look back on. It took me over a year and it was excruciating. It was a very, very difficult process. Nothing like writing fiction. And it was incredibly helpful. It helped me to process my grief. It helped me to process my life and look at it and get a little bit of distance and perspective and come away with just a tremendous amount of gratitude. I think that's related to how much you process as you're going. And then once your book is out into the world, how healthy you are as you're selling it. And I think that it's a struggle. We want to be heard. But for the healthiest outcome, you have to have enough processing in and enough distance in that you're not meeting those people who have just read your book with an open wound. Do you know what I mean? Like they have an open wound that they're bringing to you. And if you meet them with an open wound, you're just going to crumble. But if you meet them with a scar, it's there, but it's healed. And you're able to reflect back to them health and gratitude and a little bit of hope rather than sort of a spiral sucking down.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. If you're able to meet them with a scar, there can be an other side to wherever they're standing, what they're dealing with.
I see in metaphor. That's how my brain works. So I think that we're always, our culture, we're always in a hurry. And we want to go through something and then flip it over and be able to say, I went through this and here's the 3 things I learned. And be able to speak in front of 100 people and all of that. We're in a hurry. And I don't think grieving and healing and processing can be hurried. But when it is, when you allow yourself the opportunity and the time and the space to heal properly, you have a scar, but it would take quite a lot to burst it open.
It's very dangerous to not take that time. I have a situation in my life where I lost someone and I did not take that time because I had so much going on and it just upended our lives. So it was years before I ever took the time to do that. It's very unhealthy.
For sure.
There's a big,
and it's not something that we
so-
do, right? In our culture, we don't give time. We don't give space. And I think that giving ourselves grace, being patient with ourselves, being kind to ourselves is better in the long run. Life is fast and there's a lot of commitments and pressures, and sometimes we just shove it under the rug.
Especially like today's grieving process, you have the funeral, you have a few days, and you're back to work.
Mm-hmm.
There's not the time to feel.
Yeah.
You have to just swallow it down and keep moving.
Yeah, it's dreadful.
Okay, so it really is. Let's talk about reader sensitivities and trigger warnings. How should a writing business strategically handle content transparency? I don't know if you do in your book. Do you give a trigger warning?
I don't. And this might be because I was living overseas the last 15 years. And we've been home 4 years now, but I was overseas half of my adult life. And I sort of missed this shift into trigger warnings and reader sensitivities. So it's a newer thing to me that I'm still trying to absorb. I would say my answer to your question, I tried to do and that we try to do at Blue Hat is what I said earlier. We try to move our authors through the editing process to a point where they're thinking of their reader and they're not exploding on the page, if you know what I mean. There's a way to be honest and clear about different things that happened without re-traumatizing or traumatizing your reader. And that's my personal, I guess, ethos for writing memoir. And it's what we try to bring our authors to. That first draft is so critically important for your own health, but you need to edit forward thinking of your reader. So my personal experience and for my personal philosophy about how do you write. I don't have any trigger warnings. Maybe I should have. It's not something that I think about because I was very
Well,
careful.
I would think a lot of times just reading the jacket of the book would explain to a reader that this is about trauma and grief. So
Yeah.
therefore, whereas fiction, a trigger warning is probably more often used because they don't know exactly what subjects are going to be covered in the book. I
Yeah.
think that's probably why there's that difference.
Okay. That's a good point. I do not like being surprised by something I wasn't expecting. Not, not a plot twist or anything, but
Right.
when you're
No, I know,
47%
but
into the
something
book
that
and yeah, yeah.
has a visceral reaction that
Right.
it's, especially if you've had some type of trauma and it's reflected on the page without
Yeah.
you don't know it's going to happen.
Yeah. And
That's pretty tough. Yeah.
I wrote about abuse in one of my books. Even in fiction, I don't believe in traumatizing the reader. I think you can get the point across without being overly descriptive.
That's a hard line. I have a book that I'm about a third of the way through, and it's really good if I ever finish it. My issue is, and people have told me to write past this and then go back to it, but it is about a little girl who is murdered. And when the funeral, I cannot get past that.
Hmm.
And it's not that I'm pouring everything onto the page and it's that type of thing. It's going to be gut wrenching to the reader. You just assume the reader knows a lot of what that would feel like without putting on the page. But it's my reaction to it.
Yeah.
And of course, that's a reflection of the things I've been through. But that's why when I think of people who write stories about their personal trauma and grief, I give them the world of credit because even in the imagination of the story, I'm a very empathetic person
Mm-hmm.
and I just can't pull myself past that. Everybody who's read what I have written are like, wow, this is really good. But we'll see, I'm 63 years old now, and I've had that book written since I was like 45.
Well, that sounds exactly like the struggle of memoir. You have created a story and a scenario that is so real, you struggle to get past it.
Yeah, and that's one reason I wanted to talk to you about how you get through the process of publishing and marketing, because even once you gone through the draft process and editing process, and now it's more of a book for the reader as opposed to a book for yourself, I would think it's still hard to say to the world, here, read this.
Yeah, it is. You are accurate. It's very hard. It's worse than fiction for sure, because it's not just, I tried to write you a really entertaining story. It's, here's my life. Here I am, emotionally naked and vulnerable before you. I don't know if you've heard of the vulnerability hangover. We talk about that at Blue Hat because most of our authors, I would say 70% at this point, are writing memoir. So we have a lot of experience guiding authors through this particular thing, as well as, doing it ourselves. You do the best you can. You work at it. You work at it at your desk at home or in your favorite chair at home for a year. And then you peel it back a little bit and you send it out. You send it to your spouse or your best friend, and then you send it to your editor. And each time you release it further into the world, it gets a little bit easier, but then you put it into the world and you instantly, repent. What was I thinking? Why did I do this? We call it the vulnerability hangover, because you have put a lot of thought into it by that point. You have gone forward because you want to go forward, but then you have this moment of, the emperor has no clothes or whatever. You have a moment where you feel like everybody's looking at you and you don't know what you've done. And then you very quickly move on from that in most cases. So for me, I went through the exact same stages with my book and putting it out. It was difficult to write. It was difficult to send it to every new editor. It was difficult to start sending it to my pre-launch team And then once it was, once it was going out into the world, it was a process, a transitional process, and of getting used to the fact that it was out in the world. And it's just a process that I have tried to be kind to myself about and show myself grace. It is okay. We wanted to do this. It's just a little bumpy.
I think that's a good point that you made. I think through the entire process, from writing all the way through to marketing, that giving yourself grace is really important, and knowing when to just stop what you're doing and take some time to feel whatever you're feeling. Because
I grew up in a sort of a microculture where, everything was great on the outside. It was important to show that everything was fine. And that was a really difficult thing for my personality type. And I just, after a lot of years of shame and hiding, I just decided I didn't want to live that way.
that makes sense. I lived in a similar environment where what happened inside the house wasn't publicly, people didn't know. But so my approach with my kids is you don't have to feel that you shouldn't knock on the door to come into my room or anything like that. Mm-hmm. You're welcome to come, just jump in, lay in the bed, talk to me, whatever. You're able to ask me any question in the world. I'll give you an answer. There's no taboos or anything they don't feel they can come to me with. So I think that's, we grow past things, and that's the best part of the journey.
Yeah. I love that approach with your children. That is awesome. What I hear over and over again, and I'm sure you do as well, is how much people are longing for community and how lonely people are, and how social media is just an exacerbator of loneliness and keeping people away from community. The thing about community is you need to welcome people in with your story. There's obviously a spectrum of being open about your story and blabbing every thought you have and every detail of your trauma and all of that, which, you might do to your best friend or your spouse or something. I think when you're open and honest about who you are and what you're struggling with, you invite people into community. It's a welcoming thing. And you're doing that to your reader as well. When you invite them into the story, you invite them into your life, almost like you're inviting them across the table. And it can be a really beautiful thing, but you have to be willing to do the work through it, process through it, so that you're not yelling and screaming and spitting at the person across the table.
I can hear how grateful you are for this experience and for having done this.
Yeah.
I think that's an important piece of the whole thing. I think that's what drives memoir writers, is that gratefulness. Let me ask you a question. How do you approach editing with the authors on this type of material? Because I would think that being an author and giving that type of material to an editor, and they're saying, well, this works, this doesn't, this is too much, this is too little, that would be extremely hard to take, as opposed to a fiction work, because your emotional connection is so much deeper. Do you find that to be true?
100%. I always tell our authors when I'm explaining the process, I've received now 5 or 6 developmental edits back, and I cry every time I get them, because they're usually so involved and they have so much feedback and they're just overwhelming. So I try to let our authors know, listen, it is okay. This is a normal, expected reaction. Read it, put it away for a couple days, come back and read it again, and then, go at it slowly. But you're absolutely right. The difference in a developmental edit of a fiction book that you've been very honest in and told some of your true life, but it's still fiction, and a memoir is a completely different experience. I have a lot of gratitude because my developmental editor was in town. So we went and had coffee together, and I got to look her in the eye when she was giving me the feedback, which was extremely helpful. I think the approach is we're very understanding that this is a tender story. These are tender words that we have been gifted with, and we feel like it's a real honor, and we tread very carefully. It's a lot about how you speak with the author. You know, the developmental edit is very tender, is very careful. And then when we get to copy editing and proofreading, that's a little bit more straightforward. That's just grammar and typos and, you know, your sentence is way too long, those kind of things. But when it's the developmental edit, it's a very delicate process. And we very much do what we talked about earlier. We just say, listen, this is so important. This chapter is so important, and we see why you've written it, but it does not help your reader. Like you can leave this one out. You can keep this one on your computer. And we have that kind of a dialogue as we go along.
That's not just something I think you just pop into and do. I would think that editors that deal with that kind of material, specifically deal with that kind of material, as opposed to, just being a broad range editor, it may be difficult for them to handle a book about trauma.
It's why we only just recently in the last, 6 or 8 months brought on a few more developmental editors because, anybody can be experienced in grammar and in the narrative story arc, all of that. But we wanted people who would treat our authors with kindness and would understand our process and what we're trying to do. And we're trying to gently hold the hand, not just blast you with, you've written 700,000 words and we need to cut most of them. Obviously, we're all committed to doing a really good job and putting out the most excellent product we can. But it's important to us that the process is a healing process and that you are held gently as you walk along with us. And that, for sure, the type of person who is behind, the red marks matters.
Yeah, I love and I respect that approach. That really just is so helpful to authors that are trying to publish this type of material. So could you share with people more about what Blue Hat Publishing does? Because we've mentioned it a few times, but explain to them exactly what kind of company it is.
Sure, with pleasure. I love our company. We're an independent publisher. We're right in the space. We're right in the middle of the space between traditional publishing and self-publishing. And we've been going about 3 years. We were all authors when we started up, and we built the company that we wished that we could have used, basically. So everything we do, all the decisions we make, our philosophies, all of it is author-centric. So we're a paid for services company. You pay us for whatever services you hire us for, but we do not take creative control. We do not take royalties. We do not take any rights. It's important to us in all the ways that we set up that the author own everything and have control. Even in the way we put the books out. If it's a print on demand, we put it on your Amazon account because there's no reason in our minds why you should continue to pay us $100 a year in perpetuity so that your book is on our account. So all of the decisions we've made have been with the author in mind because it's what we wanted. We meet with a new prospective author, and the 3 of us, Brandon, Rachel, and I, meet with them, and we listen to them and we tell them who we are and we see, if we're a personality fit, and then we hear what they need. Sometimes we start with a person who just has an idea and we walk with them through the whole writing process. We call it book friend, but it's, kind of a coaching thing. Sometimes people bring us a completed manuscript. We've been doing a lot of children's books lately, and they'll come with their illustrator and their pages, all of that. And then we either do print on demand or we have a relationship with a printer who makes beautiful copies, and that's important to us too. So we go all the way from idea to books in hand. And then this year we opened up a warehouse because most of our authors, in the end, they wanted to have the beautiful copies, but and so that you make quite a bit higher profit that way, but that's another topic. But they didn't want to distribute every day. So now we have a warehouse where we store and distribute books that are sold every day. We're expanding our services as we go based on what our authors are asking for.
That's terrific. I love that author-centric approach. You're so involved through the process with all the different services that you provide.
Publishing is
Yeah.
difficult. There's so many different details. And most of our authors are first-time authors. They've got this passion project. They've done a beautiful job, but they don't know what to do with it. And we always tell people, like, it's a great time to be a writer. My first book 20 years ago, I couldn't get a traditional deal. There was nothing, almost nothing to do. Now, all you need is time or money. And that's way better than gatekeepers you can't get past.
At the beginning of self-publishing, it was the Wild West. You kind of had to figure it out as you went. I love the fact that there's hybrid publishers such as yourself that meet you in the middle between self-publishing completely on your own or going with a full publishing house. That there's people that you can go to and choose services to help you. I really appreciate that, because if not, you have to build your business from square one. And if you're not a business person, that is an enormous task, because there's the learning curve, there's the time needed to do that. You can avoid some of those mistakes, which are often very expensive.
We have discussions with our authors about, do you need an LLC? Are you just doing one book, or are you trying to build a business out of this? I do sort of the running of the nuts and bolts of the business at this point, and I can't tell you how many hours of agony there are in figuring out sales tax over 50 states. There's a lot of just that nitty-gritty business details that you shouldn't have to deal with. I mean, everybody can figure it out. That's not the problem. But do you need to? Can you hire somebody to figure that part out so that you have more free time to market and to speak and to try to figure out where your audience is hiding and how to find them?
Do you do speaking engagements? Because I know you said you were really into that narrow niche of adoption. So do you do anything like that, or is that something that you're planning to do?
I am trying to work toward that. Yes. I have only given one speech in my adult life, but yeah, I'm trying to actively enlarge my audience, just like every other author. I'm trying to find them and interest them in my writing, and then have them buy all my books. The only way to make any money as an author is to have more books and then leverage those books into something else, whether it's, you've seen it all as well, courses or coaching or speaking, right, or all of that. I have a college daughter of a good friend of mine who wants to be a writer, and I just keep encouraging her, yes, be a writer, but also take a business class.
Very good advice. So tell me about your book.
Okay, it's called Then Came Joy. It began because we had a very long, drawn-out, difficult, traumatic adoption experience while we were living in Turkey. We got our daughter at 24 hours, which was fantastic. But because of an almost coup while we were there, and bombings and kidnappings, and then we lived through COVID there, and through all those things, the judiciary got cut in half. So the process extended to a little over 3 years instead of 1. And then we had difficulty getting out of the country. Our governments were fighting each other and using us as a pawn. And we got out. And so we had this great, traumatic, hopeful, joyful story that our friends and family kept pressuring me to write, because I have written for years. And I just wanted to write my beautiful fiction because I enjoy fiction much more. So I started writing it and realized that I probably needed to expand the story just a little bit more so you would understand a little bit better what all the things that happened. So it turned into more of a memoir than I intended when I started, but mostly about the time that I spent overseas and then our time in the adoption process of our daughter and moving home. It's a lot about living as an expat and having other people have control of your life. I used to say we were being detained because that's the word that made the most sense to me for the years that we were there. How do you live with uncertainty? And we didn't know we were going to keep our daughter until we arrived in America. You know, it was such a fraught experience. So yeah, it's all about that. Obviously, I need to work on my elevator pitch still.
That's really scary, though, that uncertainty and being in such a volatile environment. I can't imagine having that lack of control and not knowing from one day to the next what the issue was going to be.
I have gone through a lot of therapy and all of that, and I've had time and processing, and still I'll say it was very, very difficult. But you know, my daughter's here. I can watch her from my office. I can watch her playing in the backyard, and it was all worth it.
About how old is she now?
She's 7.5, and she is full of life. I'm a raging introvert. I get peopled out pretty quickly, and she cannot get enough people. Whenever anybody new walks in, she was so excited. So it's really fun to watch her be her own little person, so different from me.
I get that. I get that. Having children myself sometimes, just like, wow, they did that. Oh, I couldn't do that.
Yep.
I really appreciate you spending this time with me. Could you tell people how they can learn more about Blue Hat Publishing, where they can find your book?
Yeah, my book is, if you go to jodicowles.com, COWLES, you can find out more there. bluehatpublishing.com is our website. We're on social media. We're pretty easy to find.
Thank you so much for joining me. This has been a very enlightening conversation, and hopefully it will help some of my audience understand where to start in this process and think about how to handle this type of subject and still get it published. Hopefully to make a little bit of money to at least pay for some of their time and effort.
Yes, amen. Nice. I agree. Thanks for having me, Laura. This was a really fun chat.
Oh, no problem. I enjoyed it. To learn more about the podcast and to sign up to be the first to learn when new episodes are out, visit writingbiz.com. Until next time, take what you learned and put it to work in your own writing biz.